This is my wife and the lead negotiator for Solaris Solutions. Victor's voice thunders across the seaport, silencing the venomous taunts of Claire and Xavier as Brianna stands unshaken, her contract a symbol of her power. Welcome, story lovers. Where are you tuning in from today? Drop your city in the comments and let us know. Will Brianna crumble under prejudice, or rise as a force no one can dim? This tale of betrayal, courage, and sweet justice will keep you guessing. Hit that subscribe button to catch our latest videos and join our community of dreamers. Share where you're watching from, and stick around to discover how one woman transforms insults into triumph. Will her enemies regret their words? Comment your predictions below and subscribe to find out. Don't miss this journey. Let's see how Brianna rewrites her story. The seaport throbbed with the raw pulse of industry, a living beast of steel and salt. Cranes loomed like skeletal giants, their groans echoing as they hoisted containers skyward, while the waves slapped relentlessly against the weathered docks. The late afternoon sun burned low, casting a golden haze over the sprawling chaos, painting the stacks of red and blue containers in hues of fire and shadow. Amid this gritty symphony stood Brianna, a figure of unshakable grace at 32, her ebony skin glowing as if kissed by the sun itself. Her long black hair cascaded in soft, defiant waves, swaying gently in the briny breeze, each strand a testament to her unyielding spirit. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer and a cream silk blouse that whispered elegance, she was a beacon of poise in the port's rough-hewn world. In her hand, she clutched a leather folder, its contents heavy with purpose, a billion-dollar contract for Solaris Solutions, the renewable energy empire built by her husband, Victor. Brianna's deep brown eyes, sharp as polished obsidian, scanned the horizon. She stood near a towering stack of containers, their chipped paint and rust a stark contrast to her refined presence. The contract was more than paper. It was a bridge to a future where Solaris could power entire continents, a deal with a European shipping conglomerate that could redefine their legacy. Victor, delayed by a contentious board meeting, had entrusted her to represent him, a role she carried with the weight of their shared vision. Her fingers traced the folder's edge, cool and smooth, as she glanced at her watch. 4:45 p.m. The Tesla's familiar hum was absent, and a flicker of impatience stirred in her chest, but she quelled it. Brianna was no stranger to waiting, to holding her ground in spaces that tried to shrink her. She adjusted her stance, her heels firm against the concrete, and let the port's rhythm ground her. The air carried a sharp tang of salt and diesel, mingling with the distant cry of gulls. Brianna's presence drew glances. Dock workers paused, their eyes lingering on the woman who seemed both out of place and utterly commanding. Her beauty was not just in her features, but in the quiet fire that radiated from her, a strength forged through years of navigating rooms where her skin and her brilliance were too often questioned. She was no mere accessory to Victor's empire. She was its architect, her strategies fueling Solaris's rise in cities from Dubai to Singapore. The contract in her hand was her latest triumph, a testament to her mind as much as her resolve. Sudden shift in the air prickled her senses, like the first gust of an approaching storm. Two figures emerged from the maze of containers, their steps deliberate, their presence slicing through the port's din. Claire, a white woman with platinum, blonde hair swept into a sleek chignon, moved with a calculated swagger, her emerald dress clinging to her frame like a second skin. Her green eyes glittered with a predatory edge, scanning Brianna as if sizing up prey. Beside her strode Xavier, her husband, his lean frame draped in a charcoal suit that spoke of wealth, but not warmth. His pale blue eyes held a flicker of disdain. His thin lips curled in a smirk as he adjusted his cufflinks, each movement a performance of superiority. They were the American liaisons for the European firm, here to seal the deal that Brianna held in her hands. Claire's gaze locked onto Brianna, and her lips twisted into a smirk that dripped with condescension. "Who's this?" she said, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet cutting through the port's clamor. "The assistant sent to fetch us? Where's Victor? We don't have time for delays." Her words were a jab, laced with assumptions that stung like salt in a wound. Xavier chuckled, his tone low but deliberate, meant to be heard. "Probably some temp they pulled from the office pool," he muttered, his eyes raking over Brianna's poised figure as if she were an inconvenience to be dismissed. Brianna's grip tightened on the contract, the leather creaking faintly under her fingers, but her face remained a mask of serenity, a skill honed by years of facing such slights. Her pulse quickened, a quiet drumbeat of indignation, but she held it at bay. "I'm here for the Solaris contract," she said, her voice smooth and firm, each syllable a stone dropped into still water. "Victor will join us shortly." Her words were measured, her tone carrying the weight of authority she'd earned, not borrowed. Claire's laugh shattered the moment, sharp and brittle like glass splintering on the dock. "You? Handling a deal this big?" She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the concrete, her green eyes narrowing to slits. "Sweetheart, this isn't the place for you. Run along and get us some coffee. Leave the real work to the professionals." Her voice dripped with mockery, each word a calculated attempt to diminish, to remind Brianna of a world that too often judged her by her skin before her strength. Xavier folded his arms, his grin widening, emboldened by Claire's venom. "Yeah, this is a billion-dollar table," he said, his tone mocking. "No offense, but you don't look like you belong here." The words were arrows, aimed to pierce, their prejudice laid bare in the harsh light of the seaport. Brianna's heart thudded, but she stood taller, her hair swaying like a dark river as she tilted her head, her gaze unflinching. The contract in her hand felt heavier, a shield against their ignorance, a weapon she hadn't yet drawn. "I'm exactly where I belong," she replied, her voice low but resonant, a quiet defiance that seemed to still the air. Her eyes met Claire's, then Xavier's, holding them in a gaze that refused to bend. The port's clamor faded for a moment, the cranes and waves a distant hum, as Brianna's presence became the center of gravity. She could have unleashed her wit, cut them down with the truth of her accomplishments. But she waited, her silence, a storm gathering strength. The contract crinkled faintly in her grip, a promise of the power she held, as the seaport held its breath for what would come next. The seaport's pulse thrummed on, its cranes groaning, and waves gnashing against the docks, but the air around Brianna crackled with a different energy, a storm brewed not of weather but of human venom. She stood resolute, her ebony skin luminous under the fading sun, her long black hair swaying like a dark tide caught in the salty breeze. The leather folder in her hand, clutching the billion-dollar Solaris contract, was a silent anchor, its weight grounding her as Claire's mocking laugh sliced through the din. At 32, Brianna was a fortress of grace, her cream silk blouse catching the light, her navy blazer sharp as a blade. Her deep brown eyes, fierce and unyielding, met Claire's predatory gaze, refusing to bend under the weight of her scorn. Claire's platinum blonde chignon gleamed like a crown of ice, her emerald dress a stark contrast to the port's gritty expanse. She leaned forward, her green eyes narrowing to slits, her voice dripping with syrupy disdain. "Oh, darling, you're out of your depth," she said, each word a calculated barb meant to pierce. "This is a billion-dollar table, not some diversity photo op." Her lips curled into a smirk, sharp enough to draw blood as she tossed her head, letting the light catch her diamond earrings. The gesture was deliberate, a flaunting of privilege, a reminder of the world she believed Brianna could never touch. Xavier, standing beside her, folded his arms, his charcoal suit creasing slightly as he leaned into Claire's cruelty. His pale blue eyes glinted with amusement, his thin lips twisting into a grin that betrayed his complicity. "No offense," he said, his tone anything but apologetic, "but you don't look like you belong here." He paused, letting the words hang like a noose, then added, "What are you, some secretary playing dress-up?" The insult landed like a stone, heavy with assumptions about her race, her place, her very existence in this high-stakes arena. Brianna's pulse quickened, a quiet drumbeat of indignation pulsing beneath her composed exterior. The contract folder crinkled faintly in her grip, its leather warm from her tightening fingers, but her face remained a still lake, undisturbed by their venom. She could feel the eyes of nearby dock workers, their glances flickering between curiosity and unease, sensing the tension coiling like a spring. The seaport's clamor, gulls crying, containers clanging, faded to a distant hum, as if the world held its breath, waiting for her response. "I'm the lead negotiator for Solaris Solutions," Brianna said, her voice low but resonant, each syllable carved with precision. "And I'm waiting for my husband." Her words were a shield, deflecting their barbs, but they carried an edge, a quiet defiance that dared them to push further. Her hair swayed as she tilted her head, the motion graceful yet commanding, a silent assertion of her right to stand here, to claim this moment. Claire's laugh was a shard of glass, sharp and grating, cutting through the salty air. "Husband?" she mocked, her voice rising with theatrical pity. "What, some dock manager? Oh, honey, you're reaching." She stepped closer, her heels clicking like a metronome of malice, her perfume, something floral and cloying, invading Brianna's space. "This isn't a game for you," she continued, her tone dripping with condescension. "Why don't you scurry back to wherever you came from and leave the real work to us?" Xavier's grin widened, emboldened by Claire's audacity. "Yeah, this deal's too big for someone like you," he said, his voice laced with a smugness that made Brianna's skin prickle. "Stick to fetching coffee, that's more your speed." He waved a hand dismissively as if swatting away an insect, his cufflinks glinting in the sunlight. The gesture was meant to diminish, to reduce her to a stereotype, but Brianna stood taller, her shoulders squared, her gaze unwavering. The words stung, their prejudice laid bare like an open wound, but Brianna's heart was a furnace, burning with a fire they couldn't touch. She could have unleashed her wit, her resume of triumphs, deals closed in boardrooms across continents, strategies that had doubled Solaris's reach, but she chose restraint. Her silence was a weapon, honed by years of navigating spaces where her brilliance was questioned before it was seen. The contract in her hand felt heavier, a testament to her power, a reminder of the empire she'd helped build. Claire's eyes flicked to the folder, her smirk faltering for a fraction of a second, as if sensing the weight of what Brianna held. But she recovered quickly, her voice rising in a mocking crescendo. "Security," she called, turning to a nearby guard, her hand waving with imperious air. "This woman's trespassing. Get her out before she causes a scene." Her words were a command, dripping with entitlement, as if the seaport itself bowed to her will. The guard, burly in his navy uniform, shifted uneasily, his eyes darting to Brianna's calm demeanor. He hesitated, his hand hovering near his radio, caught between Claire's demand and the quiet authority radiating from Brianna. The port's rhythm pulsed on, waves crashing, cranes groaning, but the space between them was electric, charged with the weight of their confrontation. Brianna's gaze held Claire's, then Xavier's, unflinching, her deep brown eyes a mirror reflecting their ignorance at them. "You don't decide where I belong," Brianna said, her voice soft but unyielding, a tide that could not be turned. The words landed like stones, rippling through the tension, and for a moment, Claire's smirk wavered, her confidence cracking like thin ice. Xavier's grin faltered, his hands dropping to his sides, but he doubled down, leaning closer, his voice a hiss. "You're out of your league," he said. "This world isn't for you." Brianna's heart thundered, but her face remained serene, a lighthouse standing firm in their storm. The contract folder was a lifeline, its pages whispering of her victories, her strength. She could sense the guard's hesitation, the dock workers' curious glances, the seaport's relentless hum bearing witness to her resolve. She waited, her silence a gathering thunderhead, ready to unleash a reckoning they could not foresee. The seaport's restless hum, cranes grinding, waves snarling, gulls shrieking, seemed to pause, as if the world sensed the storm about to break. Brianna stood unyielding, her ebony skin aglow in the dying light, her long black hair rippling like a dark river caught in the salty breeze. The leather folder in her hand, gripping the billion-dollar Solaris contract, was a silent testament to her power, its edges worn from her steadfast hold. At 32, she was a pillar of grace, her navy blazer sharp, her cream silk blouse catching the sun's last rays. Her deep brown eyes burned with quiet fire, locked on Claire and Xavier, whose venomous taunts hung in the air like smoke. The guard, caught in their demand to eject her, shifted uneasily, his hand frozen near his radio, his gaze flickering between Brianna's calm authority and Claire's imperious sneer. Claire's platinum blonde chignon gleamed like a cold crown, her emerald dress a garish slash against the port's muted tones. Her green eyes glinted with malice, her lips curled in a smirk that dared Brianna to falter. "You're out of your league," she hissed, her voice a blade honed by entitlement. Xavier, his charcoal suit creasing as he leaned forward, echoed her cruelty, his pale blue eyes narrowing. "This world isn't for you," he said, his tone a venomous whisper, each word a calculated attempt to diminish her. The dock workers nearby paused, their glances heavy with curiosity. The seaport's rhythm a distant pulse as the tension coiled tighter, a spring ready to snap. Brianna's heart thundered, but her face was a serene mask, her poise a fortress against their prejudice. The contract folder crinkled faintly in her grip, its weight a reminder of her triumphs. Deals sealed in boardrooms across continents, strategies that had reshaped Solaris's future. She stood taller, her hair swaying, as she met their gazes unflinching, her silence a thunderhead gathering strength. The guard's hesitation was palpable, his eyes searching hers for a signal, but she offered none, her presence a lighthouse in their storm, daring them to push further. A low hum sliced through the tension, sharp and electric, the purr of a black Tesla Model S gliding to a stop beside the dock. The sound was a clarion call, cutting through the seaport's din like a blade through silk. The door swung open, and Victor emerged, his tall frame commanding the space like a force of nature. At 40 he was striking, his pale skin contrasted by dark hair swept back, his gray eyes blazing with an intensity that could silence a room. His tailored black suit hugged his broad shoulders, each step deliberate, his presence a tide that reshaped the air. The dock workers straightened, the guard froze, and even Claire's smirk faltered as Victor strode forward, his gaze locking onto the scene with predatory precision. "What's going on here?" Victor's voice was a controlled storm, low and resonant, each word a thunderclap that stilled the port's clamor. His eyes, sharp as steel, swept from Claire's flushed face to Xavier's faltering grin, then softened as they found Brianna. Her lips curved into a faint smile, a flicker of warmth amidst the fire in her chest, her heart steadying at his arrival. The contract in her hand felt lighter, a symbol of their shared empire, now bolstered by his presence. Claire's composure cracked, her green eyes darting as she forced a brittle laugh. "Victor," she said, her voice syrupy with false charm. "Just a misunderstanding. We thought she was—" Her words trailed off, caught in the weight of Victor's stare. Xavier shifted, his cufflinks glinting as he raised a hand, his voice trembling with forced confidence. "We assumed she was some assistant," he stammered, his pale blue eyes avoiding Brianna's. "No harm meant." Victor stepped beside Brianna, his hand resting lightly on her back, a gesture both protective and reverent, like a knight pledging allegiance to his queen. "This is Brianna," he said, his voice steel, each word a blade cutting through their lies. "My wife, and the lead negotiator for Solaris Solutions." The declaration landed like a gavel, final and unyielding, shattering the illusion of Claire and Xavier's superiority. Claire's face drained of color, her phone slipping, slightly in her grip, her emerald dress suddenly garish against her paling skin. Xavier's mouth opened, then closed, his bravado crumbling like ash in the wind. The seaport seemed to hold its breath, the cranes silent, the waves a distant murmur. Victor's gaze didn't waver, his gray eyes boring into Xavier's with fury that needed no volume. He turned to the guard, his tone unwavering. "These two are leaving now." The guard nodded, his hesitation gone, stepping forward with newfound resolve. Victor's attention shifted to Xavier, his voice low, but laced with steel. "And the deal is off. Solaris doesn't partner with those who disrespect my wife or our values." Xavier's panic flared, his hands rising in protest. "Victor, you can't cancel a billion-dollar contract over this." His voice cracked, desperation seeping through his polished facade. Claire clutched his arm, her heels stuttering as she stepped back, her voice shrill. "She was standing here like some dock worker." She spat, her eyes wild with indignation, but the words sounded hollow, a desperate grasp at relevance. Brianna stepped forward, her voice calm but resonant, a melody of strength that silenced their protests. "I was standing here as the woman who built Solaris's sustainability initiatives," she said, her deep brown eyes piercing Claire's. "The woman who closed deals in Dubai and Singapore while you curated your Instagram aesthetic." Her words were a scalpel, precise and unflinching, cutting through their prejudice. "You don't decide my place." The guard gestured toward the exit, his movements firm, and Xavier's shoulders slumped, his confidence shattered. Claire's protests faded into a high-pitched whine, her heels clicking erratically as she was led away, her face flushed with shame. Victor turned to Brianna, his expression softening, his hand brushing hers. "I'm sorry I was late," he murmured, his voice warm with regret. Brianna squeezed his fingers, her smile radiant, the contract still in her grip, now a symbol of her triumph. "You're right on time," she said, her voice a sunrise, illuminating the seaport with her unshakable strength. The seaport's relentless pulse resumed, as if exhaling after holding its breath. Cranes groaned skyward. Waves churned against the docks and gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp in the cooling air. Brianna stood at the edge of the concrete expanse, her ebony skin catching the last glimmers of dusk, her long black hair flowing like a dark banner in the salty breeze. The leather folder in her hand, still clutching the billion-dollar Solaris contract, felt lighter now, not from defeat but from triumph. At 32, she was a vision of resilience, her navy blazer crisp, her cream silk blouse glowing faintly under the port's sodium lights. Her deep brown eyes, alight with quiet fire, gazed toward the horizon where Claire and Xavier had vanished, their silhouettes swallowed by the maze of containers, their pride shattered like glass under Victor's unyielding verdict. For the guards, heavy footsteps faded, his navy uniform a blur as he escorted the disgraced couple away. Their protests, Claire's shrill complaints, Xavier's stammered pleas, were drowned by the seaport's indifferent hum, a requiem for their arrogance. Brianna's heart thrummed with a steady rhythm, not of anger but of clarity. She had faced their venom, their assumptions about her race and place, and emerged not just unscathed but ascendant. The contract in her hand was no longer just a deal. It was a symbol of her agency, a testament to the empire she'd helped forge. Victor stood beside her, his tall frame a quiet anchor, his tailored black suit absorbing the twilight. His gray eyes softened as they met hers, a silent apology lingering in their depths. "I'm sorry I was late," he murmured, his voice a low tide of warmth, his hand brushing hers with a tenderness that grounded her. Brianna squeezed his fingers, her smile a radiant sunrise cutting through the port's gritty haze. "You're right on time," she said, her tone soft but unyielding, a melody of strength that echoed across the docks. The moment was hers, a victory carved from their shared resolve, but it was her poise, her defiance in the face of prejudice that had turned the tide. The seaport's clamor, metal clanging, waves crashing, seemed to applaud her, a chorus celebrating her unshakable presence. As the last light bled from the sky, the weight of the confrontation settled, but the battle was far from over. Claire and Xavier, desperate to salvage their crumbling dignity, turned to the courts, filing a lawsuit against Solaris Solutions within weeks. Their claim was bold, accusing Victor of breaching the billion-dollar contract over a misunderstanding. Their legal briefs painting Brianna as an insignificant figure who'd provoked their ire. The audacity of their move sent ripples through the industry, whispers of scandal threading through boardrooms and news feeds. But Victor was a strategist, his mind as sharp as the contracts Brianna crafted. He'd anticipated their retaliation, his foresight a shield forged long before their taunts at the seaport. In a sleek Manhattan courtroom, the air was thick with tension, the polished wood benches gleaming under fluorescent lights. Brianna sat beside Victor, her hair cascading in elegant waves, her tailored gray dress a quiet declaration of her authority. The judge, a stern woman with silver hair, peered over her glasses as Victor's legal team presented their case. Dossier, thick with evidence, was laid before the court like a guillotine. Recordings captured Claire's racist remarks at industry galas, her voice dripping with disdain for diversity hires and token faces. Financial records exposed Xavier's shell corporations, murky entities siphoning funds from legitimate deals. Emails, unearthed from their servers, revealed their pattern of discriminatory tactics, blacklisting minority-led firms, undermining competitors with whispered slurs. The courtroom buzzed, reporters scribbling furiously as the evidence mounted. Claire, seated across the aisle, clutched her purse, her platinum blonde hair dull under the harsh lights, her emerald eyes darting with panic. Xavier's face was ashen, his charcoal suit rumpled, his cufflinks no longer glinting with confidence. Their lawyer, a wiry man with a nervous tic, stammered through objections, but the judge's gavel fell like a thunderclap, silencing their defense. The truth was a tidal wave, washing away their lies, their company crumbling under the weight of their hubris. The lawsuit was dismissed, their reputation reduced to ashes, their names synonymous with scandal in headlines that blazed across the globe. Brianna felt no glee, only a quiet satisfaction as she watched the proceedings. The contract, now safely filed, was a distant memory, its purpose fulfilled not in ink, but in the justice it had sparked. She had stood at the seaport, her voice cutting through Claire's venom, and now that voice echoed in the courtroom, a testament to her resilience. Victor's hand rested on hers, his touch a steady pulse, but it was her strength that had carried the day. She was no longer just his partner. She was a force, her contributions to Solaris, sustainability initiatives that powered cities, strategies that reshaped markets, now undeniable. Back at Solaris's headquarters, Brianna's role expanded, her office a sleek space of glass and steel where she crafted new global initiatives. Her desk, adorned with a single orchid, hummed with possibility as she pored over proposals, her mind a beacon for innovation. Colleagues, once skeptical, now sought her counsel, her insights drawing clients like moths to a flame. The seaport. Confrontation had become legend, whispered in break rooms and board meetings, a story of a woman who'd turned prejudice into power. Brianna's hair, loose and flowing, caught the light as she worked late, her deep brown eyes reflecting a future she was building, not just for herself, but for every voice silenced by assumption. The port's memory lingered, not as a wound, but as a forge where her resolve had been tempered. Claire and Xavier's downfall was a cautionary tale, their empire reduced to a footnote in Solaris's ascent. Brianna stood at her window, the city skyline glittering beyond, a canvas of ambition. The contract, the confrontation, the courtroom, all were steps in a journey that had revealed her strength. She was not defined by their scorn, but by the fire within her, a flame that burned brighter with every challenge met, every barrier broken. The Manhattan skyline shimmered like a constellation of ambition, its spires piercing the velvet night, each light a testament to dreams forged in steel and will. Brianna stood on the balcony of their penthouse, high above the city's restless pulse, her ebony skin radiant under the moon's soft glow. Her long black hair flowed freely, a cascade of dark waves dancing in the evening breeze, catching the silver light like a river under stars. At 32, she was a vision of grace and power, her tailored gray dress hugging her frame, its elegance a quiet declaration of her unyielding strength. The seaport's gritty clamor, cranes groaning, waves crashing, was a distant memory, its weight replaced by a clarity that burned within her, a fire kindled by her triumph over prejudice and doubt. The city hummed below, a symphony of horns and distant laughter, but Brianna's world was still, anchored by the moment she now inhabited. The billion-dollar Solaris contract, once a battleground, was now a cornerstone of her legacy, its ink dry but its impact enduring. She had stood at the seaport, her voice cutting through venom, her poise a shield against Claire and Xavier's scorn. The courtroom's gavel had fallen, their empire reduced to ash, but this night was not about their defeat. It was about her, a woman who had claimed her place, not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. Her deep brown eyes, sharp as obsidian, traced the skyline, each light a story, each story a spark of possibility she would ignite. Victor stepped onto the balcony, his tall frame a quiet shadow against the glass doors. At 40, he was a study in contrasts, his pale skin glowing faintly, his dark hair swept back, his gray eyes warm with a reverence that spoke louder than words. His black sweater and slacks were understated, a departure from the tailored suits of boardrooms, yet his presence carried the same commanding weight. He slipped an arm around Brianna's waist, his touch a steady pulse, grounding her in the vastness of the moment. The city's glow reflected in his eyes, but they saw only her, the woman who had reshaped his world as much as she had her own. "You didn't need me to fight that battle," Victor said, his voice soft, a low tide of admiration rippling through the night air. His words were not about the seaport or the courtroom. They were about her, the fire she carried, the strength that had turned a moment of prejudice into a monument of triumph. Brianna leaned into him, her hair brushing his shoulder, her smile a sunrise that warmed the cool air. "I fought for me," she said, her tone a melody of conviction, "and for every woman who's ever been underestimated." Her voice was quiet but resonant, a vow etched into the city's pulse, a promise to herself and the world. The penthouse balcony was their sanctuary, its sleek railing framing a view that stretched to the horizon. Brianna's hand rested on Heir, the cool metal, her fingers tracing its edge as she reflected on the path that had led here. The seaport had been a crucible, its harsh light exposing her strength, but this moment was her canvas, a space to paint a future unbound by others' limitations. Solaris Solutions, the empire she and Victor had built, was no longer just a company. It was a movement. Her sustainability initiatives, powering villages in Africa, greening cities in Asia, were her legacy, each project a brick in a foundation that would outlast her. Her office, a sleek haven of glass and steel, buzzed with new proposals, her desk adorned with a single orchid, a symbol of her rooted resilience. She turned to Victor, her eyes meeting his, a silent conversation passing between them. Their bond was not just love, but a partnership forged in shared purpose, tempered by challenges met together. The seaport had tested them, but it had also revealed their unity, a force no prejudice could fracture. Victor's hand tightened around her waist, his gaze steady, a mirror to her resolve. "You're unstoppable," he said, his voice a quiet thunder, each word a testament to the woman who had stood tall when others sought to diminish her. Brianna's laughter, soft and musical, mingled with the city's hum. "I'm just beginning," she said, her eyes sparkling with the promise of what lay ahead. She saw it clearly, a world where her voice, her vision, would shape industries, inspire change. She imagined boardrooms where her strategies would silence skeptics, communities where her initiatives would light homes, and young women who would see her story and know they, too, could rise. The contract, the confrontation, the courtroom, all were stepping stones to this moment where she stood not as a survivor, but as a creator of her destiny. The night air was cool, carrying the faint scent of rain, a whisper of renewal. Brianna's hair flowed like a dark tide, her dress catching the breeze, her presence a beacon against the skyline. She was no longer just Victor's wife, nor Solaris's negotiator. She was Brianna, a force rewriting the world on her terms. The city below pulsed with life, its lights a constellation of possibilities, and she felt them within her, a galaxy of dreams waiting to be born. She glanced at Victor, his warmth grounding her, his love setting her free. The balcony stretched before them, a stage for their shared future. Brianna's heart, once tested by scorn, now beat with purpose, each rhythm a promise to keep rising, to keep shaping, to keep shining. The skyline glittered, a canvas of ambition, and she knew this was no ending but a beginning, a life where her strength, her love, and her vision would carve a legacy that echoed beyond the stars. She stood taller, her hand in Victor's, her eyes fixed on the horizon, ready to claim the world that awaited her. What a journey Brianna's story has been. Did her unyielding strength at the seaport inspire you? Or did Claire and Xavier's downfall strike a chord? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear how this tale of resilience and justice moved you. A huge thank you for joining us on this emotional ride, for letting Brianna's light spark something in your heart. If her story resonated, share it with someone who needs a dose of courage. Subscribe and hit the bell to catch our next tale of triumph and transformation. Where are you watching from? Let us know below. Until next time, keep chasing your own horizon, and we'll see you in the next story.